dear friends, hello once again and welcome to another interesting feminist episode. And in this episode, like of course a sequel to the first one, where we talk about the Bible and the women, the questions that we are currently responding to in the episode. And of course, we encourage that you join in the conversation. If you have any question based around the Bible, I mean, whatever it is, just send it in. Let us discuss it. Let us, have a wonderful time going through the scriptures and see what the Bible has to say about each of those topics. So in the last episode, we discussed what the Bible has to say about women and women rights, misogynism. Is there anything like that? Okay, that's not like misogynism. But I mean, that God is God a misogynist? Is Bible a misogynistic text? What are the things that we touched on last episode?
Okay, so in Genesis 1, we see God created man and woman equal. He created man and woman in his image. He didn't create one in the image and then the other. But then we see that yes, there was no women are no afterthoughts of God or anything. But we see that he made them. He was just there was like a broad explanation of the process and how everything came to be. And then we also see that after the fall of man, everything just went left.
Very left and south.
So we see that everything went left and then there was just no balance anymore. Things went left. So God was trying to teach them how to live together and how to treat and how to value women. So there was no point where we see God encouraging what they did or anything. It was not his plan from the beginning. Yeah, that was basically what we did.
I think it was also the text we read from Deuteronomy and how it was just a quick example of how women who were slaves at the time, because that was just a brief example to give how women should be treated who were brought from slaves, who were brought as slaves. And then we see, of course, you had to, first of all, when she comes, she's no more a slave in your house, as opposed to the normal culture that is point and kill.
Point and kill. What is a woman, you like her? I mean, after with her right there on the point.
And then you had to wait. She had to be part of your home now. Then you give her a span of 1 month to mourn her family, her father and mother. And then even after you want to put her away in quotes, after the 1 month or however long you guys have been married for, if you see that you don't want to be with her anymore, then you have to let her go. And she's not selling her off as a slave, but just letting her go as a free person. And of course, we spoke about how this is a different. It was way different from what they had at the time, which is quite interesting, of course, given that at the time, because of course, if we are reading the Bible with today's lens, is still a problem.
But in that
time, it is just. I mean, a good example, just a little off topic. A good example, if we are talking about exchanging messages in 21st century, it's like, I mean, shoot me a text, but 15 years ago, if you are calling, you have to. So I mean, of course, at that time, if somebody talks about how they had to be on the phone, their phone bill was high because, or somebody was phone hogging because they were calling this thing. Everybody, we cannot relate at this point because everybody has their own device in their hand. Or at that time, it's only your parents that can make calls.
I remember that they used to lock our telephone in a box so that when my parents are not around, we will not call our friends in school, and also they will lock it in a box. We can only pick the receiver, but we cannot do the dialing because it is locked in the box. I'm sure you guys did not know that, but we experienced that.
or even the idea of caller ID. I think when they started making it was mind blowing that you can actually know who is calling you. Because normally the phone will ring, you pick and
say, who is this?
Now you can
I will just say, hey, Ozie, because I know who is calling me, and then I can decide whether to pick or not. We need to add that. So it's interesting that God was building a people and a nation that was so different from the people and the nation of those days. And like you were asking me that why do people have to marry, you know, if your brother is late, and then why do you have to marry his widow? And while that would have been a part of the system that saw women as properties, it's also because they tried to protect the women. Because if your husband is late, you're a widow, you are very vulnerable in that kind of society, you did not have a job, there's no way you will take care of the children. So to make sure that you are protected, your rights are protected, and you are taken care of, they will then marry that widow to a relative of the husband to make sure that she's catered for, and the children of the widow is also taken care of. So in that same culture, God was making sure that these women are protected. Even though today it might look like, why will I marry? Because why will I marry the brother of my late husband? Because today you have your job. Today you work in a bank or something. You can take care of yourself and take care of your children. But in those days, women didn't have that kind of privilege. So if you're reading scriptures, don't read scripture because as if they live in New York City or Kuala Lumpur or whatever city you live in. They live in the ancient world where women didn't have all the luxury that men have, that women have today. Now women are educated and they have the way to fend for themselves and have income. So God was also protecting them and making sure that they are catered for in that kind of system. And then beginning today, we would also just begin to see how that some of the things recorded in scriptures were not endorsement. Some of the things recorded in scriptures were just things that they're just telling us to see that, hey guys, this is what actually happened. We are not saying yes or no. I mean, I've read a few books about the World War. One of them was by one of the greatest Christian thinkers of recent years. Her name is Corrie ten Boom. Corrie ten Boom survived the Holocaust, and then she wrote about it so much. And in this little book I read, when I read about the Holocaust, I saw that it was really bad. But I never for once thought that Corrie ten Boom endorsed it. I never for once thought that Corrie ten Boom is an anti-Jewish woman. But she was just saying that this is what happened. And because herself and her family were protecting the Jews, they were also in harm's way themselves. So she was just writing about what happened. And I have never, and I'm sure nobody that has ever read Corrie ten Boom think that she was supporting the Nazis. The same way, should nobody reading the scriptures think that the authors were endorsing the things that happened in those days? And I mean, one of the very popular narrative that I like is the story of Agai in the book of Genesis. How that Abraham married, of course, had something to do with his wife's servant. And it doesn't get worse than that. You know why? Because Agai is not just a woman, but she's a slave. She's not just a slave, she's a foreigner. She's not just a foreigner, she's a second wife or a mistress or a side chick. She's not just that, she's black. I mean, how disadvantaged can someone get? She's at the low of the lowest. And of course, she was maltreated because she was very, very vulnerable with all these things that I've counted. She's female, she's a servant, she's a foreigner, she's a second wife, she's black, all these things put her in a very, very vulnerable situation. And of course, she became vulnerable to her master and her master's husband, Sarah and Abraham. But see what happened. After they banished her from home, she was in the wilderness. And then her son was going to be with her, and her son was going to die. I'm trying to see where we can pick it up very well. That would make a good read, so that we would not read a lot. And then while she was away in the wilderness, she was carrying her baby, of course, Abraham's son. Then she was lamenting that the son was going to die. And okay, let's read from verse 17, Genesis chapter 21 from verse 17. So this is a woman, she is very, very vulnerable, and she has been put in a very terrible situation, and then God is stepping in again to see how God is protecting the rights of women. And then God is saying here in Genesis 21:17 says, and God heard the voice of the lad, which is the baby that Agai was carrying, And the angel of the Lord called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thy hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad to drink. Okay? And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an acre. So here we see how that God came into the scene to this woman that is vulnerable and helped her. And then after this experience, you know what she said? She said, now I know a God that sees. And that was how we got the name Jehovah El Roi, the God that sees us. It was the name that Hagar, the servant Egyptian second wife girl, gave to Yahweh the Almighty God, because God saw her in a predicament. And the same thing extends to every woman out there that is being oppressed, depressed, taken advantage of, and going through all the decadence that the society is throwing at women, that God sees. God sees you, God sees your pain, and God is sending help your way. Father, this is why you are listening to this, because God has seen you and God is sending help your way. So God is not saying, yes, you deserve what you've gotten. No, He's saying that I see you, and I am the one that is bringing help to you in the midst of all the things that you're going through as a woman. So we see again God miraculously rescuing and bringing help to a woman that has been taken advantage of. And of course, we see again in Deuteronomy, like we read in the last episode, how that God is also creating laws and statutes that will protect women. Now, one more thing. In this women, in this Pentateuch, before we go on to the prophets, in Numbers 27, I like this story of, there was a man, Zelophehad. That's the name of the man, out of the shadows. That's the meaning of Zelophehad, out of the shadows. Now, he had, daughters, but then he died. And remember that women don't have inheritance, men have the inheritance. Yeah. And then when you marry the man, you enjoy from the inheritance. It's a way to make sure that everything goes around. And then, but this man only had daughters. So that means his inheritance was going to be given to another family. And the daughter said, no. That's not going to happen. So they now went before Moses and before Eleazar the priest, and then they made their case known that we didn't have any inheritance. Now our father is late. You have to give us the inheritance that belongs to our father. Remember that in those days, all the nations surrounding Israel, women don't inherit anything. The only thing you have is what your husband have, and of course you have it even indirectly, not directly. Not like today, that when I have something and I say I'm not doing it again, they will say cut it into two. I mean, whatever your husband has, you don't have directly, you have it indirectly. But these women said, we want what our father has. We want to inherit, which was very, 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 very legendary in those days. It was something that was out of the norm. But of course, God through Moses allowed the daughters of Zelophehad to have inheritance. They inherited what belonged to their father. And of course today it might sound as of course it's normal. It wasn't normal in those days. This in those days was way out of the blues. It was way out of their league. It was way out of what they could think or imagine that could happen in those days. So we see God again protecting the rights of women here, even through his prophet, whenever there is a culture that was pushing them aside and making them less human, so to speak. God was making room for women right on the high table. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
I remember going into a conversation with someone, and of course at that time the person was opposing the Bible and how the person was opposing Christianity and championing the traditional way of culture, even in Africa. And of course, I did not. I was laughing in my head thinking about it, because okay, let's use this for example, and how these women went to fight for their rights, and even up until we have not even gone into the New Testament and what will happen and the revolutionary change that has happened. Now we still have practices, or we still had, I don't know if they are still in existence today, that when the prince wants to marry, they parade all the women. Like these are many of the practices, the cultural practices we had at the time that looked okay. And if we are going to stick to what culture presented to us, we will continue in that line. Or when the king dies, his male and his female servants, mostly because they want the king to be taken care of in the afterlife. In the afterlife. So we have things like that being. We even have another worldview, which we should not call the name, who in recording a woman's testimony, a woman's testimony, two women's testimony is what equates to a man's testimony. Literally, even in a court. So if you want to testify against you, or they want a testimony of a woman, they have to bring two women, whereas one man can say it. So we see how there is a real shift with the value, even in the...
Yeah, and that's the truth, because what we have today is built on these things that the Bible has introduced way back. So what looks as if is normal now in the 21st century, that we are civilized and we have come of age to see that women are equal to men, it was because the Bible introduced it first. If the Bible had not said anything about it, we might not have arrived at this point. We would have been in that point where you say that women are paraded to men and women are buried with their kings and so on and so forth, because that was what we knew. Just the same way that was how the Canaanites, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the contemporaries of the nation of Israel, that was how they were thinking as well. But when God said, no, you cannot do that, women are the same with men, God introduced that idea for the very first time. And that is how we have come to this civilized point, because it is very rooted. The foundation is right there in scriptures. Even though now we've thrown away the God of that idea, and we've kept the idea, but we see that idea is fizzling out into the liberalism, because we think that we are liberal. That is how we arrive at women are equal to men. No, it's not liberalism. It is the God idea. So if you throw away God away from that idea, and we think it's liberalism, then we move far left, and we see how the liberalism has ended up into perversion, into abuse, into confusion, and so on.
And I would like to say that if by chance any other person has a different, because this is if you have any other source of information that trumps this, please do share. I mean, that shows that at this point, when Moses said, if there was, you can check the Mesopotamian history, the Babylonian history, other because I remember telling somebody, they say, where in history? I'm like, pick all of them and start going through. So if you find any particular one
that predates these ones,
please, we would love to update our knowledge. We're not saying we have all the knowledge in the world. So
So now, of course, we mentioned Deborah, and now that Deborah was the leader of the nation of Israel thousands of years before any other nation had a woman leader, and now that was also the first of its kind in the history of humanity. And of course, all through Old Testament, we even see women prophets. We see women that were leading the nation in different capacity, showing that God does not have any bias against women taking leadership position. Then, of course, now that I'm flipping through my Bible, I see Job, and of course, you know that Job was one of the earliest literature written, and of course, you will know that in the Bible, when they want to talk about descendants, they talk about women, and they talk about men rather as descendants of people. But when they want them to mention Job's descendants, guess what? They only mention the women, showing that the women were given a place in history even as early as in the days of Job in scriptures. In those days, only men were children, of course. But when Job was restored and Job gave birth to children, they said he gave birth to 3 daughters and 7 men. They mentioned the names of the daughters, Keren Apuchi, Jemima, and Kezan, I think, but they did not mention the name of his sons.
Wow.
So we'll keep flipping through. I mean, and then, cut out some other part until we get to the New Testament and we see Jesus on the scene. But of course, we cannot think of Jesus without thinking of his mother Mary. How that God found her worthy to bear the incarnate Son of God, bringing him into the world as a young teenage girl. And of course, throughout the ministry of Jesus, we see women playing prominent roles. As much as Jesus had male followers, he had female followers that were very close. In fact, those women were the ones that were sponsoring his ministry, preparing food for them, and so on and so forth. And of course, we see, like you said, the witnesses of the women when Jesus resurrected. How that the witness of the women were the ones that even till today we base our faith and conviction upon, that he resurrected, which in those days women don't bear witness in court at all. So the fact that the women were allowed to make witness shows that women were given equal right and privileges as men. Now in the New Testament and the days of in the age of the church, women also, do they have the same level and position as men?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. They came with this whole still mentality that women are less. But then I think Jesus tried to show them that women are equal.
Yeah.
He was trying to remind them of that same image that God has made us all together in. So we are equal. We are equal now. We are equal in Christ Jesus. We are not. I'm not less, and somebody else being more or anything. We're equal. So, yeah, basically.
So, what about in the church structure? Can women also come into, because we mentioned that even in ancient Israel, women were given leadership position. Yeah. Can women also take leadership position in the church structure?
Yes, because we all received the Holy Spirit. We received the Holy Spirit. So, Acts 2. Sorry, not Acts 2.
Yeah.
Screen. Anytime I try to use my phone Bible is when I don't see anymore.
That's why the hard copy is better.
Because once you flip it.
Yes, you will know that I read it on the left or right.
I cannot see it. But it was talking about the verse where we have all received
where Peter was preaching. Yes.
Now sons and daughters. It didn't just say sons.
And this is what happened. Okay, I will find it. They shall pour my spirit upon all men, and they shall prophesy.
Yeah. So
I think verse 18. Yeah. Even
yes, he said, "I'll pour my spirit on my servant and on my handmaidens." Handmaidens are women servants.
This version says male servants and female servants.
Verse 17, the verse that, "And shall come to pass in those days, say God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams."
Yes. So the gift of God were not based on gender. It was for all of us. So we can't just say women cannot preach. And I've seen so many questions come up, like some people say, okay, women can speak,
but they cannot preach.
Or you'll say women can take up maybe there's pastor,
there's associate positions.
Yes, so they can take all this but then the head women cannot take. I'm like, why? Like, why did these things come up? And it basically came up from 1 Corinthians 14:34, 1 Timothy 2:12, where it says women should not speak in church. Yeah. But then we see, even from Genesis, where we see that these things were a lot of cultural issues, and this was also
a cultural issue.
Yes. Paul was answering a question. You want to say something?
Yeah, I think for us to, I don't know if we still have time, but for us to really, there's this thing that was going around, people calling Paul a sexist, and how his books are, one-sided. And of course, I've had conversations. One thing I would like to, we don't have to read it, but Galatians chapter 3 verse 28 already states it. This is what Paul's stance is on it. He says there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. Bam. This was the said statement. So whenever we see this kind of statements, then we see something that contradicts it in other parts. Because one thing we have learned is, if it is for all the churches everywhere, he will write it everywhere. But we see that he only wrote it in Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians, the 1 Corinthians 14, and First Timothy. So we have to ask ourselves, why did he write it to these people? What? And remember that his letters are responses. They are answering questions. Or his book to Timothy was pertaining issues, because even if we go through the book of Timothy, we see that he already starts charge those people here. So do this here, do this here.
Yes.
So he was giving specific instructions
to things that were going on
at the time. But it wasn't. But his thoughts on women is there is neither male nor female. Because if we go to the famous Romans chapter 16, we see how
a long list of women
he celebrates as fellow laborers in this service. So he rates women as partners and co-laborers. The same way he will make reference to Timothy or Peter. The same way
as my co-laborer, I also mentioned women in that same light.
I mean, obviously, we will still dive deep more into these particular verses, but I just felt like highlighting the Galatians chapter 3 verse 28 because it's really, really important. It's an important base for discussing the issues of women preaching, because I also come from a place back home where women allowed. I think it was one time when a woman preached at a full week convention, and we're all blown.
Like, whoa, wonders still happen,
We were all very blown. But now, understanding the Bible, going through proper scriptures, you are just like, how did these people come about this?
How did they reach this point?
How did they come with this idea?
They've allowed the culture to seep a lot into their biblical interpretation as well. Yeah. So, 30 minutes is not enough.
Yes, I think we'll have to make a third part to address this particular
30 minutes is not enough to deal with this issue. So if you think we've left anything out, if you think that there is this thing that you guys have not talked about, or if there's a question coming to your mind about women, the Bible, feminism, and so on and so forth, please let us know. Tweet at us, put it in the comments. Let us know that this has been a blessing to you. Are we going to have a third part?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm all for it.
So we're going to do a third part to this. Third and final part, hopefully. And dealing with the issue of women and the Bible. But until then, share with your friends, join in the conversation. Let them know that there's something going on right here that they need to be plugged into. So we'll come your way again in another episode. I pray that you remain in the firm grip of Jesus' love and care. God bless you.
Bye.
Now I am free, yeah.